Oxenfree is a short, frantic ride through teenage drama and the paranormal. It is without doubt a game that has been influenced by the evolution that adventure games have undergone in the past couple of years. Its richly mysterious world and well-realised cast are a testament to the power of the character-driven narrative that in some ways excels far beyond even the most acclaimed of its contemporaries. Nevertheless, underwhelming horror, disappointing puzzle sections, and an often lethargic pace contribute to a game in which tedium overshadows even its most compelling secrets and revelations. A wild night of teenage debauchery awaits Alex, our protagonist, and her small group of friends as they descend upon Edward's Isle, a former mining outpost and military base turned tourist attraction. The well-practiced adolescent tradition of drunken revelry goes awry when, equipped only with her trusty radio, curiosity gets the best of Alex. Their cell phones now rendered defunct, Alex's friends are scattered across the island alone and afraid, and Alex is faced with the unenviable task of rounding up her friends and attempting to escape the island unscathed. Players take control of Alex from a side-scrolling perspective, as she wanders the lonely fields, shores and forests of Edward's Island with different members of her party of friends in search of a safe way home. Navigation is simple. Minor platforming elements are present, such as scaling a rocky wall face or leaping the occasional chasm, but these pose no real challenge. They seem there rather for geographical consistency or as a means of making the environment seem a little more varied, especially in areas where backgrounds seem similar. Travelling is slow. There's no definitive run button, so movement speed is dictated by context, whether you're enduring a friendly stroll with your friends or a mad dash to escape a terror. For the most part, this is a reasonable decision, so as not to make the small but detailed map feel tiny as you tour the island. However, the pacing this creates makes the initial half of the game in particular feel overly deliberate and at worst, agonisingly drawn out. On a related note, though the inclusion of a map is useful for keeping track of your objectives and their general location, the vague and confounding signposts littered throughout your journey are imprecise and sometimes guide you towards an unintended target, so you can often find yourself going astray unless you pay close attention to the map. Together, these factors stifle much of the wonder of exploring the game's environments. That's not to say the environments aren't compelling in themselves. Excellent ambient sound design in the quiet forest chorus, the calamity of the thundering waterfalls, or the whipping wind on top of the communications tower lends to your surroundings a wonderful depth beyond their stylized design. Those visuals themselves are gorgeous. The forest wildlife is a beautiful blend of a fibrous felt-like texture and a stunning earth tone palette of green, brown and purple. The diversity of locations on Edward's Island adds a good variety of environments to the map to explore, though not quite all of them are as interesting as others. The game relies, therefore, more on character investment to affect the player and entice them through its plot, and often the moment-to-moment dialogue is the only thing pulling you onwards. Though players may initially seem ambivalent to the teenage tribulations on display, the game employs numerous techniques so that the characters' endearing personalities slowly grow on you. In this regard, the most striking element is the voice acting. The authenticity of the performances impart far more flaw and subtlety to the characters, and the dialogue writing is made to feel genuine by the inclusion of slang, wit and sarcasm. These are elements that are essential to grounding these characters in an immediate and relatable way. Furthermore, the game chronicles some wonderfully familiar teenage situations, whether it's the torture inflicted by the friend who's brash enough to ask outright something terribly uncomfortable, or the anecdotes about the adventures of your more headstrong classmates. Despite its small size, Alex's group of friends contains interesting teenage politics that create a great dynamic in which the friction is as entertaining as the harmony. Meanwhile, characters seem realistic, whether in motivation or action, sometimes quiet and shy, sometimes foolhardy, and others playful or silly. Characters' visual designs are also well defined, and despite the game's wide field of view, each character has a different clear colour palette to make them more recognisable and seem more distinct. And finally, the careful development of each character over the course of the game, through well-paced insight, uncovers an understandable depth to each of them, and by basing it in a formative adolescent venue, is something that many, if not all, can relate to. In controlling Alex, players can navigate through dialogue options to talk with their friends. Just as you would chat with your own, the conversation never stops, giving you small but telling glimpses into each character. How you respond affects your friends in powerful ways, and the subtlety of this system is the most brilliant aspect of the game. This could be as small as a throwaway comment or as large as vocally defending someone being picked on. These all contribute to an underlying influence system that dictates how your friends endure their trials and evolve over the course of the tale. The game plays with this, never making it clear how much or how little you can affect the outcome of everyone, and throughout the game teases and foreshadows the more significant narrative choices. This system not only grants the player a greater degree of agency, and by doing so confer a greater sense of involvement, but it also contributes significantly to replayability. It's worth interrupting at this point to mention that playing the game on a gamepad is recommended and even necessary, whether on PC or console, as juggling movement and dialogue is infuriating, and nigh on impossible with keyboard and mouse. Despite its mechanical excellence, the application of this system leaves much to be desired. Dialogue options are too fast, and many times do you find yourself missing your chance to respond before you've even managed to read and contemplate all the options in front of you. Though remaining quiet is often wise and pertinent, it's disappointing when you miss your chance to explore a particular question you're dying to be answered about someone's mysterious past. Moreover, when choosing dialogue, players must balance your rapidly diminishing response time with whether you think someone is talking about something interesting or relevant, as choosing a response will result in Alex interjecting and dismissing someone completely without allowing them to finish. Though this isn't always the case, as it seems that crucial dialogue is more carefully curated, it often results in a confused mess, and prolonged exposure can mean you lose interest entirely in the conversation at hand, something which is quite regularly the only thing entertaining you as you trudge through field and valley on the way to your next objective. From a more traditional adventure game perspective, the game is very sparse in its offerings. Tuning in Alex's portable radio is the core mechanic in this regard, and is used to influence electrical sources, open doors, and even to commune with the paranormal during the course of Alex's journey. For those searching for more depth in their exploration of the island, the radio can also be used to pick up hints and to locate some of the non-essential but intriguing anomalies scattered throughout Edward's Island. One can even follow along with the guided radio tours that are strategically placed throughout the game. In this way, the radio is an excellent tool that enriches the world significantly for the curious by adding another layer of depth and history to the island. However, there's an intense dullness in slowly shuffling through stations until you encounter a frequency that affects your surroundings. And as something that takes no skill to perform, it's infuriating when the required frequency is at the entire opposite end of the spectrum. This is compounded by acquiring another radio late in the game, with an even broader range that takes far too long to navigate. Occasionally, players will be confronted by the challenge of rotating an old tape deck to produce music at the correct tempo, in order to extricate themselves from a sticky situation. Again, there is no real challenge here, and feels far too simple. Perhaps the most promising puzzle elements of the game is in the form of recognizing and identifying parts of your environment under pressure in a sort of I Spy game, or enduring a pop quiz on the history you've been learning. However, these happen so rarely that they too seem underutilized. As with many of Oxenfree's other elements, the game's atmosphere is worth noting for both the good and the bad. Though the combination of the great sound design and electronic soundtrack creates a subtle and unsteadily melancholic backdrop to your exploration, and despite the wonderful voice effects and mysterious and spooky random radio frequencies, the use of terror in the plot itself is highly disappointing. Characters readily witness and accept supernatural events, seeming largely unperturbed by a huge occurrence, and dilutes significantly the impact of a lot of the more tense, terrifying moments. Too many times do you get a jump of fright or sense an unsettling, eerie presence, only to be brought tumbling back to banality when the next sentence uttered by a character sounds bored and far removed from the inherent threat of their situation. Ultimately, Oxenfree disappoints from both a horror and adventure perspective, but excels in a personal and interesting depiction of coping with loss. The richness of the world can't be disputed, whether the many intricate endings, layers of mystery, and subtle yet powerful character influence system. The lens through which one chooses to view Oxenfree is indicative of whether you believe its highs are enough to outweigh its lows. Yet, even under a most generous interpretation, the reliance it places on your investment in its characters simply cannot escape the clutches of a lack of tension and a stymied sense of exploration.